The American Association of Christian Counselors and Light University welcome you to a professional program in Christian life coaching. AACC wishes you special blessings as you begin this incredible study.
In this section of the coaching series, we're talking about developing an effective model of change. Change happens in one of two ways. As Dwight Bain says, it either happens by a crisis or it happens by a choice. In Christian coaching, we're mainly dealing with clients who are not dealing with a crisis. Now, there are exceptions to that, like divorce coaching, but most of the time our clients are not in a crisis type of situation. Therefore, the model of change we're going to talk about today is one that begins with a choice. In fact, many times you'll find your clients will come to you because they're stuck. They want to do something different in their life, but they're not quite sure how to go about that. One of the most researched models for change is the stages of change developed by Dr. Prochaska and Dr. D. Clemente. There are 5 stages of changes which they developed and which you see on the screen right now. I'm going to talk about each one of them, and then we'll discuss them individually. But the 5 stages they developed are the pre-contemplation stage, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. In the first stage they developed, the pre-contemplation stage, this is when a person is either unaware of a problem behavior, or they know it's a problem, but they really have no intention of doing anything about it. For instance, maybe someone is overweight. They either A, see themselves as a little bit on the chunky side, or they know losing weight would help them and reduce their blood pressure, but they don't want to do the work that's required to make that change happen. In our coaching, many times this pre-contemplation might be where our client has maybe an attitude or a habit that they're not aware of, or they're discounting, thinking, oh, it really isn't hindering my growth. We're going to address in the session on advanced coaching skills how we can deal with that issue. But for now, I just want to explain what is that pre-contemplation stage. The next stage then of change is the contemplation stage. And at this stage, the client is aware there is a problem. They want to do something about it, but yet they're not at that point of readiness where they're going to make the commitment to make it happen. Maybe they're unhappy with the way things are. They don't like the fact that they've let things go and they've gained this weight. But they're not ready to make that emotional investment. They might feel that emotional discontentment, but they're, again, not ready to move forward. They're still weighing the pros and cons of the situation. Next, in the preparation stage, which is the third one, the person intends to take action. They are going to lose weight, and they begin to make the plans how they are going to make this happen. Are they going to go to the fitness center and get on a specific program? Are they going to change their diet? But they're starting to figure out how it is that they will implement this change. And at this stage, the person is emotionally invested in making this difference in their life. Maybe they want to lose weight because their children will be proud of them and that they'll be taking care of themselves. Maybe they want to be respected more by their spouse or their co-workers. But regardless of the reasons, they're ready to move forward. That takes us to the 4th step, which is action. In this stage, we begin to see the actual behavioral changes. The person is implementing their plans. They're going to the fitness club. They're eating differently. They're committing whatever time and energy is needed to make this happen. And then the last step in their model, the maintenance stage, in this step, the client is just continuing whatever behavior they started in the action step. They realize there's going to be times that's setbacks. There's going to be times when they're not going to work out or they don't eat well, but they're going to continue to move forward. They're going to continue to focus on their goal, and they're going to focus on the success that they have done. And in spite of these setbacks, they continue to move forward. Using their stages of change in this theory, I have simplified it into 4 stages of change. The stages which you see on the screen are, we're going to help our clients to recognize, organize, energize, and realize their God-given dreams. Let's start with the first stage, recognize. In this stage of the change process, we're helping our clients identify where are they right now and where do they want to go in the future. In Christian coaching, it's especially important that we help them pay attention to the leading of the Holy Spirit. Where is the Holy Spirit? Where's God leading them in their life right now? We're looking in the recognized stage at the whole person, the complete person, not just one facet of their life like their career. And for example, the 6 areas I have on the screen right now is just an idea of the different areas that you want to look at. There are different inventories that break this down differently, but the basic idea is you want to look at the spiritual part of the person, the emotional, the physical, the mental, the social, and the vocational. And as you're discussing and exploring these areas, you want to look at, are there any particular areas that they're focusing on? Are there any areas that they're ignoring? For example, maybe they're expending a lot of resources on their career, but they're devoting little time and energy to their relationships, to cultivating caring relationships. Also in the recognized stage, you want to help your client understand how these areas are all interrelated and how they affect each other. You're going to help your client using different inventories and assessments to understand what is their personality, what are their natural skills and talents, what are the life experiences that God has allowed to happen in their life, how is God equipping them. And third, as you listen to their story, listen closely for their passion. What are some of the things that they value? And later you will work with them to help recognize their vision and their mission. But before we're ready to move on to that second step, which is organize, it is important, it is critical that as a coach, you make sure that together you clarify this change, this choice that they want to make in their life is a God-appointed change. And so the question, we have 3 areas we're going to look at. The question you want to ask, is it a God-appointed change that they're considering? Is it a people-appointed change? Or is it a self-appointed change? The goal is to make it a God-appointed change. A great example of this is Joshua. Joshua was the man who led the Israelites into the promised land, into that place of fruitfulness. But if we look at Joshua's life very closely, we can see how God molded and shaped his life, how God equipped him to be the leader he became. Joshua was born in Egypt. He was born in slavery. He knew firsthand what it's like to live under an arrogant, abusive leader who does not serve the one true God. That experience alone, living in slavery for 40 years Joshua lived in Egypt, had to influence the kind of leader he became. He also, later then, when he got to witness the supernatural miracles of God, he learned that he is serving a faithful God. He was able to work with Moses for 40 years. He mentored with Moses in the desert. What an experience that had to be. And then finally, the most important thing is in Deuteronomy chapter 3, we read, God is telling Moses, but charge Joshua and encourage and strengthen him. And isn't that what we want to do as coaches? Encourage and strengthen our clients? So the Lord is telling Moses to encourage and strengthen him because it is Joshua who shall cross over at the head of this people and who shall secure their possession. So just like we look at the life of Joshua and we can see God's hand, how he equipped and gave him these experiences, the questions you want to ask your clients, help them to recognize how are they uniquely qualified and what is God appointing them to do. I have to tell you, I've seen this happen more than once, and so it's an issue I have to deal with. Far too often, people want to make a choice, a people-appointed choice. They want to please the people in their lives. Could be their spouse, could be their mother, but somehow they want to please. A perfect example of this is Ken Geyer. In his book, Windows of the Soul, he writes about how he became a pastor because of the suggestions of others. But he said, God had not called me to be a pastor. Other people had. And it was the type of thing I wanted to please people, so I took the job. But he talks about after 2 years of what he calls awkwardness, and that's a key word I want you to hear. After 2 years of awkwardness, he tells how he felt this compelling urge to write, and how he awoke each day, pouring himself into each sentence, each word, and how it was so satisfying. But he felt guilty about that. Not guilty about enjoying writing so much, but about that he didn't enjoy pastoring at all. He said it was like finding the missing piece to the jigsaw puzzle of my life. Suddenly everything fit. Ken writes, I knew then that God had crafted my personality, shaped my life experiences, and given me certain skills to make a writer out of me. As a coach, help your clients to recognize, how has God crafted their personality? How has he shaped their life experiences? What skills has he given them? Because if they try to please other people, what happens is, like Ken Geyer, they're going to have this sense of awkwardness. It's not going to be a comfortable fit because it's not who God created them to be. Then the next problem we have to be aware of as a coach is we want to make sure the change that they're considering is not a self-appointed change. That they're not going out there and sort of doing their own thing. Because as Andy Stanley writes in the book Visioneering, until we discover God's purpose, there will always be a hole in our soul. And if we let God's visions die, part of us will die as well. Sometimes it's pretty clear that what the goal your client is looking at is probably a self-appointed change, something that they've just come up with by themselves. Let's say, for instance, their goal is to be rich and famous. Well, if that's the case, then you can direct them to the research in positive psychology, because all the research in that area is showing that the only way we find true meaning and joy and fulfillment is a life where we use our skills and talents to serve others. But then sometimes it isn't so clear. Sometimes the client is really struggling. Is this what God wants? Or is it my desire? Sometimes we're not always sure. We get confused. And it's only through prayer and waiting that we come to that point of God's peace. I'm going to share a story of Ann Byler, who is the founder of Auntie Ann's Pretzels, because it really exemplifies this issue. Plus, it also shows that it's important as coaches, we never tell our clients what to do. We never tell them what we think God is doing in their life. What happened is, many years ago, Ann's daughter, at the age of 2, was killed in an accident. And Ann and her husband, of course, were devastated, and they went, and she sought counseling from the pastor at her church. And he was a kind, caring, charismatic kind of guy. And as she met with him week after week, he took advantage of her emotional vulnerability, and he seduced her. Well, as a result of that devastating experience, Ann and her husband became passionate about finding a way of providing safe Christian counseling to other families so that they wouldn't have to endure what she and her family went through because of that experience. But there was one problem, and that was they didn't have the financial resources to start this ministry. But they started anyhow. They stepped out in faith, and in an effort to earn grocery money, put food on the table, Ann started to sell pretzels. She sold them at a farmer's market in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Well, what happened was this pretzel business exploded, and it became more and more successful. And it became more and more difficult for Ann to help her husband in the counseling area of their ministry. And so at one point, exhausted, she said to her husband, "You take care of that, and I'll take care of the pretzel business." But here was the problem. Ann didn't have God's peace about it, because she was beginning to wonder, was this God's desire for her life, or was this her desire? And I would be willing to say that some of us as coaches might be tempted to think, well, you have the pretzel business, which is about making money, and then you have this wonderful coaching ministry, which is about using her life experiences and following her passion. And we might be tempted to guide her in that direction. But here's what happened. She continued to pray, And one day she was singing at church and she prayed again, "Lord, do you want me to give up the pretzel business?" And she said at that moment she had an image of Jesus smiling as she hand rolled the pretzels. And she said it was a defining moment for me. From that point on, I never doubted Annie Ann's was my ministry. And if I tell you now, years later, she made millions, but she's given millions away, you would understand what a powerful ministry that became. As coaches, it's important we ask our clients questions to help them recognize, are they forging ahead with their own ideas? Are they following the desires of others? Or are they following the purposes and plans of God? You see on the screen right now some sample questions that you could be asking your clients at this stage, such as, where are you right now? What do you like about where you are now? What don't you like about your current circumstances? What do you care deeply about? How has God created you? How are you unique? What are your spiritual gifts? What are your skills and talents? What are the strengths of your personality? What are your life experiences? Once our clients have recognized this and they're ready to move on to the next step, which is organize, they're ready to begin planning and organizing how they're going to reach this goal. It's much easier to move forward if you have a plan in place. In this step of organize, what we want to do is, first of all, we want to help our clients stay focused on their skills, their talents, and strengths. While that might sound obvious, what I have found out is many times when they're starting to organize and break down how they're going to accomplish this, what's the first step, what's the next step, is suddenly, when it's becoming closer to a reality that they're going to move forward with this, suddenly they start to focus on their weaknesses, their inabilities, things that they can't do. And you'll hear comments like, God can't use me, I really don't have what it takes. So we have to take them back and keep refocusing on their skills and talents. As Marcus Buckingham and Donald Clifton have written in Now Discover Your Strength, the goal is to use your strengths as much as possible, and I love this term, damage control your weaknesses. They discuss how too often we're tempted to train our weaknesses. We take courses and we want to get better in areas that we're not good at, when in fact we should be taking those resources in that time and devoting it into areas where we can then excel. Now, I do have to qualify this and say there are going to be times when God is going to call you to use a weakness. And so the second thing in Organize is we want the client to research, well, what additional education do they need? What learning or experiences are they going to need in order to move forward? From my own personal life, I was called to be a communicator and I was called to write a book, but I didn't have the skills to write a book. So I had to take courses on writing. I attended writers' workshops. I joined a writer's critique group where I had people critique my writing. And so these are some of the things that I had to do in order to get ready, to prepare, to organize for my God-given dream. Then the next question is, in this step, is who are the people in your life who can help you? Who are the people around you right now that can share their experiences and their expertise? And who are the people that you can start to network and reach out to that they can share their experiences? And then we have to realize that you can't plan every detail. Yes, we map out the direction we're going to move, but we're not always going to break it down, especially if it's a long-term goal, in step-by-step pieces. There is no record in the story of Joshua leading the Israelites into the Promised Land where he had a clear military plan. He was forced to seek God's direction, to seek God constantly and obey what the Lord told him to do. And that's what we need to do. Andy Stanley says, and I love this quote, that many times you will know what God has put on your heart long before you're going to know how to do it. And he reminds us, how is God's specialty? So as coaches, we partner with our clients in prayer. We help them recognize where they want to go and organize the steps. But there often comes times where they have to we just encourage them to take a calculated risk, to step out in faith, because this is what they believe God is calling them to do. Some questions you see on your screen that you can now ask in this stage of Organize. Ask your clients, what are the resources you need financially, spiritually, emotionally, and physically? What skills do you need that you don't have right now? How can you get them? What training and experience do you need to become more competent and effective? Who are the people around you in your life that can help? Where do you need to step out in faith and take that risk and trust God? And then what's the first step? And what's the next step? Then we're ready. If we've organized and we've got our plan in place as much as we can, we're then ready to energize our God-given goals and dreams and purposes. And the first point I want to make under this stage of change is you got to make the commitment. And many coaches feel it's really important to make that commitment clear. Write down the date. Maybe have them sign a contract. Write a letter of commitment. I even read in one coaching book where the coach draws a line or puts a piece of tape on the floor and has the client, physically step over that line as a symbol of making the commitment. They are now going to take the first step forward. They're going to start moving forward. Then, in order to energize it, we need to take action. We need to see those actual changes in our life, those behavior changes. They need to start devoting their time and resources to what they've committed to do. Then they continue with that plan. Yes, there's going to be times when you're going to have to make adjustments. Things don't always work out. As a coach, we continue to keep our client accountable both for that long-term goal or goals and also the short-term goals for each session. We track with them and keep them focused along the way. And then a very important step in Energize is we need to help our clients stay with the pain. From my experience, I have found that this third stage it's really valuable to have a coach, because invariably there comes a point when you're pursuing your dreams and your purpose that you realize it takes work, it takes hard work, and it gets stressful and it's challenging at times. And so it's at this point that the coach can help you. As a coach, we can help our clients. How do we help them stay with the pain? Well, first of all, we normalize the pain. This is totally normal. It's part of the process of growing. I have seen over the years some of the most talented, capable people come to the point where they just become weary, they're dealing with too many obstacles, and they want to give up. And we need to remind them at this point, this is totally normal. This is part of the growing process. We will have these times. As the football coach Tom Landry has said, setting a goal is not the main thing. It's deciding how you'll go about it and staying with the pain. So it's normal when you're growing in these areas to stay, that you need to understand, you need to stay with the pain. Next, another way we can help our clients in this tough time is to give them a new perspective. Like Bill Hybels says, we need to help them to focus on the mountain mover, not the mountain. We need to remind them as Christians there is a spiritual battle, and nobody would be happier than Satan if they gave up and they quit. We need to encourage them to be patient with the process. Oswald Chambers has said that every God-given vision will become real if, and that's an important if we only have the patience. Oftentimes, though, our clients get impatient. They want things to happen immediately. They don't want to wait till these changes happen in their life. And so again, we have to keep them in that process. We have to help them, remind them to rely on the power and the purposes and wisdom and timing of God. Doug Marin, in his book, Keeping Your Dreams Alive When They Steal Your Coat, and by coat he's referring to Joseph's dream in Genesis 35, says that it isn't the dream that gets tested, it's the dreamer. When God gives a dream, there's nothing wrong with it, but the dreamer probably needs a lot of work. So sometimes in these challenges, God's developing our inner strength and character. And then we want to rely on the prayers and support of others. We don't achieve anything of great consequence by ourselves. We need to be willing to ask for help when we need it and to rely on others. Some sample questions you see on the screen right now that can help with this stage called Energize is, how can you minimize the daily distractions of life? How are you doing at balancing the different areas of your life? The spiritual, emotional, and physical. What can you do to re-energize yourself? How can you help to rebuild your confidence when it gets down? What are some things you can do? What is challenging the most about your current situation? What is one thing in your life that you're most proud of? What do you believe about your ability to move past this obstacle? What resources do you have available but you're not using them? Do you need to readjust your priorities? And what will you do for yourself if you overcome this challenge? How will you celebrate that? But if our client stays in the process, then as a coach, you get to share in one of the greatest joys there is. And that is they realize their God-given dream. You want to celebrate that moment, that they're living this purposeful, meaningful life. And you want to just let them know that not only have they grown, but they have bloomed exactly to be what God has created them to be. You want to help them sustain the changes they made. Sometimes it's not just about reaching that point, but it means we have to keep on going at whatever goal we've reached. Sometimes it means that the process in the relationship is over, and we'll talk about that in advanced coaching skills. But the issue is that as we realize our dreams, we never stop growing. There's always another level we can move to. Some sample questions that you see on your screen that you can be asking your clients about the Recognize this stage. Have you celebrated the fact that you pursued your passion? What are you doing to continue growing? Is the stress you're experiencing the right kind of stress? What do you need to say no to? What could you do differently? What are you willing to do to overcome any setbacks you might be facing? What would you like to learn more about? And what would you like your life to look like in the next 5 years? I mentioned at the beginning of the video that change begins with a choice or a crisis. And I've been discussing a model of change that starts with a choice. However, I briefly want to talk about the fact that sometimes we'll be coaching a client and they will encounter a crisis. Sometimes it'll be like one of my clients a couple years ago. Her husband was driving to work, and on his way to work he was hit and killed by a drunken driver. Immediately, her life was turned upside down. She lost her source of income, her husband, the father of her children. She suddenly was dealing with insurance issues and legal battles. And at that point in her life, she didn't need a coach. She needed a counselor. She was grieving, and she needed someone to help her move through that process to heal. Sometimes there'll be situations where a client runs into a crisis, but it's not a major life change. And they're grieving appropriately. They're dealing with it. And they want to continue to work with you, the coach. What do you do in a case like that? Well, sometimes you have to readjust your expectations. You have to slow down the process and realize that their resources are going to be depleted by this loss. But recognize that even though the client is impacted by the crisis, they're not crippled by this change. The other issue I want to talk about is we've been talking about the overview, the model of change. Within each session, then, a structure you can use is the GROW model. And it's a simple acrostic that stands for G, for each session, what is the goal? R, what is the current reality? What is the client dealing with right now? And are they seeing the reality of it, or are they making assumptions? The O is, what are the obstacles and options? where they are right now. And then the W is what's the way forward? What will they have to do? And then the wrap up. But I've given you some ideas here of the overview and some specific model that you can use as you're helping your clients move through this process and change. Now what I'd like to do is I had the opportunity to interview Dwight Bain, and I'd like us now to look at that interview. Today I've been talking about how we as a coach can help our clients move through the process of change, to help them to realize and organize and energize so that they can realize their God-given goals and dreams. So what I would like to do, Dwight, is just to go through each one of these and gain your insights to share with our viewers. The first stage is recognize where we are now, where we want to go, and what are some of the things or the techniques or the ideas you have for us?
You know, when I love talking about change. It is my all-time favorite subject because we're all changing. God set up a system that we would change. There's a verse that Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians. It says, though the outward man is decaying, is dying, the inward man can be renewed day by day. And that's really what a coach does. We come along and we help people, but we can't help them until they reach a place that they're able to recognize, you know what? It's not my mother, not my brother, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. When I'm able to recognize, when that coaching client, and so that means as coaches, I can't come in somebody's life and kind of whack them on the side of the head, kick them in the seat of the pants and say, you need to change. That's your mother's job.
Right.
That's not a coach's job.
Right.
When a coach comes into somebody's life, when they're able to recognize, these are the things in my life that need to change. And when I first have that conversation with an individual, almost always on the telephone, I'm going to talk to them about their goals. I'm going to talk to them about their insights. I'm going to talk to them about what do you want to change, because it's their agenda, not mine.
Right.
And to be able to help them change starts with, and it's at least half the battle, for them to say, here's what I know that I need to work on. Now, if they have no clue, yes, there are coaches that can help them to get on a path, but for the type of work that I do, when I'm thinking about change, if they don't want to change, coaching's not for them. If they don't want to change, if they just want to talk about it and they don't want to do anything about it, then maybe they need to sit and watch some self-help television or something, but they're not going to experience great success in coaching or as a coach if they haven't embraced the idea, I need to change and I need to do it now. I believe that's what God holds us accountable to, that even though the outward man is perishing, the inward man is renewed day by day, and that's about change, and that's why this subject is so important.
So when you're working with clients, they're at that point of readiness, and you're helping them to recognize that. Well, then the next stage is organize. They're committed, they're going to make this change, they want to grow to their maximum potential. How do you help them energize?
Well, when I think about energizing and organizing, let's look at both of them. First, we'll start with the organizing piece.
Yes.
Because you can't get energized. I'm passionate about that subject until I'm organized, and that means I'm going to sit down. Now remember, I can't say it strongly enough to the folks who are watching. If an individual isn't ready to change, if they're kind of like, well, I'm talking about losing weight or I'm talking about a job change, if they just aren't ready, that's the end of the story. Time out on the field, it's done. If they're not really at that point to recognize personal change in their life, then they won't sit down and be disciplined to be able to focus on the control elements that we want to see them work on. When I talk about control, I mean self-control, self-discipline, and that is to organize the challenges that they're facing and the choices that they need to make to overcome those challenges. And so we're going to look at, and for me, the type of work I do, I'm going to lay those out. I'm going to strategize those different challenges that they're facing. We're going to organize the problems. We're going to organize the potential options. One of my favorite phrases, you always have options. My kids get tired of hearing me say it, but they'll get stuck and I'll say, okay, what are your options? And they'll go, I know, because Dad, you always have options. But we do. And so when I'm going to organize an individual, I'm going to organize those problems, we're going to list them out, we're going to organize our options, and then we're going to come back and look at priorities. Because for many, many situations, as a coach, we're going to help people with major life decisions. That's pretty serious stuff.
Right.
But if I know my priorities, the priority very well answer the question for me. When I think about priorities, if someone says, my priority in life absolutely is quality time with my family, and they're looking at some career choices, then if a career choice is going to steal time from their family, it's off the chart. It's not an option anymore. And so as I'm sitting down and organizing those challenges, those problems, the different obstacles that then I'm going to sit down and list out at least 1 or 2 possible options for each of those challenges, and then we're going to get excited because now we've got a plan to be able to move forward to the next part, which I believe you said was energize.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Energize is our next point. I have one more question on organize. You're planning it out, how they're going to implement it, but do you ever have sometimes where it's a real difficult challenge, or they have a God-given goal and they just don't know how they're going to do it? You can gather so much information, you can generate so many options. What do you do in a case like that?
I'm glad you asked me that, because and I'm kind of smiling and shaking my head because it's, yeah, you just described every day of my life. I don't get the easy ones. I get the challenges. But I believe that God has designed us and equipped us. And so here's a real simple formula that my coach, my mentor, John Maxwell, helped me with. It's the idea of moving from information to application, and that leads into motivation. Here's what I mean by that. Information is to educate ourselves. It's to gain new skills. Mm-hmm. But if I just have information, that's the head stuff, that's not going to change your life. You know, the number one New Year's resolution is to lose weight. People buy books about losing weight. They have a lot of information about losing weight in their head, but it didn't change their life, and they didn't lose any weight because all they had was information. You've got to move from information to application, and the key to that is motivation. So how do I get motivated? Motivation is a heart change. It's an attitudinal change. It's something inside of me that says, I can do this. And sometimes our job as a coach is to come alongside and help someone overcome their fears. It is to help them with those fears in their heart. The Bible, gives us a principle. When Paul was writing to Timothy, he said, God has not given you the spirit of fear, but the spirit of love, of power, and a clear mind. Yes. And so much of our job sometimes is to help somebody overcome fear. Over 300 times in Scripture, it says, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. So I'm going to move from information, which is head, application, which is hand, but the key to be able to do that is we've got to get that heart change. That's the motivation piece. That's the motivation piece, and I believe that's the part that leads into staying energized.
Right. Now we're on the topic of energized. How do you help your clients stay energized?
Well, when we start the very first time, we have a list of goals. We have a list of their goals. We have a list of strategies of possible ways to deal with those. And so we're always going to go back to that list. That's why that is so important. In coaching, there's a lot of accountability, not just for the client, but for the coach. Right. And that accountability is not to be rent-a-friend. Hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and we meet together, and you write that person check. That's not coaching. I don't know what that is, but it certainly isn't ethical. Coaching is about results. And so we've got a written plan that says, here's what we're trying to accomplish. In sports, George, it works like this. It's a scoreboard. If you love basketball, if you love football, any sport, they have a scoreboard. They keep track of the score. And so we stay energized sometimes by saying, how much time do I have or have I allocated to be able to accomplish a particular goal? We stay energized by looking at the standards, the goals, the plans, the strategies, the projects. Listen to the word, deadline. I'm not sure who invented that word, but I know in my life sometimes it feels like I'm going to be dead if I don't get this done and this project finished by that point in time. And so part of our job to stay energized is to keep the goal in sight. Another part is to stay close to our supports. It's to stay well structured. I'm a firm believer that if you're on a regular routine, and you and I have talked about this many times, we have to protect our energy, especially as we age. Yes. And that means that we've got to have time for exercise. We've got to have time for me time, for downtime, for relaxing time. We have to have time for personal worship. We have to have time built into our life to connect with friends. One of my favorite memories, you and I had a coaching session sitting on the inner harbor of Baltimore. And we were taking notes, we were talking about things, we were talking about helping people. But there has to be time built in to connect with our friends, connect with our family, connect with our faith. Because as we do that, those are the things that will keep us energized as a coach. It's very easy to get burned out when you start diving in to help people deal with problems in their life. If you're not energized, then you're in trouble. It's kind of like in a car. It's not just the battery. Batteries will run down if you don't have an alternator. An alternator is a personal generating system, and for us, it's having that structure, having those supports, having those built-in routines, and having a faith of knowing, God, you've called me to do this, and he who has called you is faithful to do it. God is our generator. If we'll follow those basic principles in his word, that's the alternator that keeps our battery charged up, and when our battery's charged up, we can help our clients stay charged up to get results.
What happens when a client is working really hard, and you know as the coach they're working really hard, and they're facing one setback after another setback, and nothing seems to be happening, and they're just at the point they're saying, this is too hard, I guess it was a pipe dream, I don't know why I thought I even should try this. What do you say to that person?
I'm glad you asked me that, because in my experience in coaching, my experience in working with people now over 25 years, there are a lot of setbacks. I've had a lot of setbacks. You've had a lot of setbacks. I mean, you got problems, I got problems, all God's children got problems. But there will be failures. John Maxwell, my friend, wrote a book called Failing Forward. He said if you're 6 feet tall and you fail, at least fail in the direction toward your goals and dreams, because at least you're 6 feet closer even though you fell and face planted. And when I think about that person who's discouraged, I'm going to be like a coach in the locker room at halftime of a team that's getting just smashed. I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, guys, take a breath. Because our job is to help people accomplish results in their life, to reach their dreams and goals, to be a guide on that journey, but to understand what Robert Schuller wrote about was called the peak-to-peak principle. You get to the mountaintop, it's exciting, but to get to the next mountaintop, you've got to go through a valley. So there will be valley experiences. We see that in the life of David. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, because you are with me. Well, the coach sometimes is that Jesus with skin on, as we would say. That person that God sends to encourage. And watch the word, Georgia. To encourage, hyphenate it, is to build courage. Or as the great philosopher John Wayne once said, courage is being scared to death but saddling up anyway. And so when somebody has not accomplished those dreams and goals, I'm going to tell them, take a breath. We're going to go back and look at those original plans. And probably the other piece of it is timing. Yesterday I had a chance to talk to somebody about some media programs, Oprah and Dr. Phil. And I've helped people get on some national shows. It's part of what I do as a media coach. But there's a timing process. And if you get the timing out of sequence, you will not get good results. And so we're going to sit back, we're going to encourage them, but we're going to step back, we're going to analyze the situation, and we're going to figure out, okay, what went wrong, just like a sports team. We didn't win today, we got hammered. What can we learn from this experience? Watch the game film so we can make some corrections. And the bottom line principle, we're going to build on strengths. If it wasn't somebody's natural gifting anyway, if it wasn't their natural strength, they probably never will have success with that. So part of our job as a coach sometimes is to say, like Simon does on American Idol, you know, you're the worst singer in the history of the world, you never should sing on any stage again. And people laugh about that, but sometimes he's doing them a favor because it's not their gift. Recently, he told that to somebody who said, you're not a great singer. They went over to Broadway and won an Academy Award.
Jennifer Hudson.
That's right, because she really, singing as a pop princess was not the best thing, but somebody who came alongside in that sense, who gave her some coaching advice and said, you need to stop this path, go in a different direction, got a huge result. She ought to write Simon a thank you note because he said some hard things, which probably was hard to hear, probably hurt her feelings, to get her off the wrong path, to get her onto the right path. And sometimes that's what a failure or a setback will do. It will help us to get on the right path, to get the right result in someone's life.
Oh, that's great insight. That is great. Finally, they do stick with it. We've encouraged them, they've kept on going, and they realize their God-given dream. What can you tell us about that stage?
You know, there's a stage, and you and I have experienced this, we've seen it. There's a stage where just like a coach who's just won the Super Bowl, they dump the Gatorade on his head, and everything feels good. Joe Namath, the great quarterback for the New York Jets, once said that when you're winning, nothing hurts. When you're losing, everything hurts. And so when we help people reach and accomplish their goals, it feels good. It's exciting. We slap high fives. You know, we're really jazzed up. But then here's part of the process. Sometimes it's time to say goodbye. Sometimes it's time to say, you know what? We won. We accomplished our goals. And this is as far as I will take you. And God will have the next coach, maybe somebody watching right now. God will have another coach who will take that individual to the next level of success, because coaching is a journey, coaching is a process, and coaching is for life.
What happens when they realize that life-given dream, but you are going to still work with them, but you're going to take them up to the next level, so you're setting new goals. So you've got to sustain this momentum. Is there anything else in that sustaining step that you found that helps your clients?
Well, regular contact, staying in touch with them, and staying focused on results. Accountability is probably the key on that one, because I'm going to come back and look at those benchmarks. I'm going to come back and look at the numbers, because in coaching, if we're not moving, if we're not making progress, then I believe that either we need to terminate the relationship, we need to go in a new direction, we need to get a new coach. We've got to shake things up because we're talking about change. If things aren't moving, change isn't happening, and coaching is not getting the results that it should get. So if I don't see that part happening, that's where we're going to have a sit down and come to Jesus meeting to figure out what's really going to work. And sometimes that change is going to be between the coach and the client. They're going to have to make some changes to get the results that they want.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your insights. They're just so valuable, and you have personally shared so many of them over the years with me as my coach. So I just want to thank you personally for helping me become the person God has created me to be.
And you know what, Georgia? Every time you've had a big win and you've called me or emailed me and you said, "Thanks, Coach," I want you to know we shared in that success together. Way to go.
I want to encourage you now to take these principles and apply them to your life, as well as help your client to grow. As you've just seen from my high five moment with Dwight Bain, when the client wins, you, the coach, also win. So I challenge you to help your clients to move through this process, to recognize, to organize, to energize, and to realize their God-given dream. And then one day, like me, you will get a handwritten note in the mail that says, "Thank you, Coach. Thank you for encouraging and challenging me. Thank you for helping me change my life."